This is podcast number 6, recorded at 5:41 p.m. approximately on January 31st, 2013. Subject at hand will involve Figment, writing, and food. Because that's a thing now, apparently. Hey everybody, it's Megan. Welcome back to podcast number 6. Going to give this thing another shot. I really do actually enjoy doing podcast formats instead of actually doing a video format. Video format takes a really long time, and here I can just spontaneously think of things and just make it, work by talking into a mic instead of having a camera in front of my face, either via webcam or my nice little Canon PowerShot ELPH 100HS. But hey, I'm not going to complain too much. Lately, I've been really into a bunch of websites that have really helped me out in terms of writing. As of recently, I've gotten into writing, so I needed a website that would allow me to put my work out there and try to get some views. Recently, a Vlogbrother video caught my attention. Actually, it was a little while ago. It might have been like 6 months ago. Nerdfighters helped me out on this one. But it's called Figment. And it's a very nice, well-designed, well-organized website. It's very nice, especially in comparison to Fiction Press and Fanfiction. Fanfiction.net and fictionpress.net, for those who don't know. I think it's .net. Might be wrong on that, too. But anyway, those websites are very old-fashioned looking, and they're very hard to navigate. Like, I can't get through that website to save my life. And for some reason, I wonder why. I stopped writing for a long time because I didn't like it. I've only written one fan fiction, and I finally decided I'm going to do this on my own and create my own stories. The thing was I was always worried about losing the files, etc., within, obvious reasons. But I ran into Figment. Figment is very nice. Unlike most writing websites where you're kind of restricted to only writing original work or fan fiction, here they allow both, which is okay, kind of alright. I'm not going to push too hard to see nothing but Harry Potter, but I'm also not going to push to see just originals either. I kind of like getting a good balance of the two, though I don't read fan fiction. It is nice to see that we can allow creativity in both fields. And another thing I do like about it is that unlike most writing websites, you can actually create your own cover. Yeah, a book cover for your book on a website called Figment. I like this site already. I think I've been on this thing ever since the Vlogbrothers video came out. And I actually really don't have very many complaints about it, which is really funny to think, because here's the thing. I really like Figment. My problem has been the people who write on Figment. My problem is authors in general, and I have a very few selection of books that I really like. And there's a reason for that. John Green being one of them, because of the way he puts words together, and he's clever. Going on a small tangent. Excuse me. First off, let's see the formatting here about Figment. Is the fact that you have a profile which shows all of your literature listings, and as well as that, it shows you your basic bios. And the first complaint I ever have to throw about Figment is the fact that you actually have to you actually have a couple of options. You can either write comments or reviews, and they don't even have really a separate formatting for either one. It's just a review is generally a more in-depth comment, and a comment's more like, that's cool, or this one little detail. Review is supposed to be like this big long thing, but there's no character limit, so I'm not sure how exactly that works. So that's kind of a weird thing to me. I mean, it's a nice idea, but it's more like categorizing than actually posting a review, because I'm waiting for somebody to be like, I'm posting a review in the comments, or I'm posting a comment in the review section. Ha ha ha. Trying to be all corny and funny. But apparently also they have an option where they can eliminate and show whether you want swaps. What are swaps? Swaps are when you swap whether you want somebody to read your story and you read one of theirs back, or poem or whatnot. The problem here with this is that you have an option on your profile to show whether you approve of those or not and whether you will do them. Nobody looks at this. Figment's like, here's an option for you to select yes, no, or maybe on whether or not you want to take swaps. I selected no. I think it's silly. Oh, if I look at your stuff, will you look at mine? No. If I find your stuff and I like it, I'll comment on it. If I don't like it, I'm going to read it and ignore it. I'm going to read it and ignore it. I'm not going to have any comment on it, and you're not even going to know if I read it. So, no, I don't like swaps. It's kind of annoying. Kind of cheap, too. But nobody looks at it. Everybody's like, oh, do a swap with me. Read my profile. It says no swaps. Quit giving me swaps. It's annoying as all hell. But basically, I recently got on Figment and came to a very interesting realization. As I do, for those who don't know, I have Asperger's, so I have tendencies. And one of those tendencies is when I walk at work. There's a lot of walking involved. We have to take care of the floor, etc. But one thing I do is I talk to myself a lot. And some people think I'm schizophrenic. No, that's not it. I could do a whole other podcast on that if I wanted to. Which, if you guys are interested, let me know. But basically, I have this tendency to talk to myself and kind of go through this like mental story or mental realizations or anything I want to go over that's really important. Like a lot of my philosophical lawmaking or other type of life-changing thoughts occur at work when I'm walking on the floor, because then my mind's gears keep cranking and I can think for some reason. I don't know why, but I can. And an interesting thing was that when I was talking to myself, thinking out loud, as I call it, I started coming to the realization that writing, as well as reading, is a lot like going to a fancy restaurant and eating food. Which I was like, oh no, I can't believe I just made that analogy. But I did. And alas, the restaurant writer's author's analogy was created in my head. And for you today, I am going to give that basic analogy. Now, mind you, I'm not a very good author myself. I've never written anything. I've never been published. I'm not good at anything in this line of work. It's just an analogy. And me as a reader, at least, can take note of this, so when I find a book, I have something to compare it to. I mean, even Harry Potter falls in this perfectly. So, I mean, we'll give it a shot and we'll see what happens, I guess. But for those who are interested, here's my basic analogy. Basically, what it boils down to is when you want to read, that is your first step. You are hungry for words. You are hungry. You want to eat. Or in this case, you want to read. And I feel like I'm going to burp anytime soon. I'm not sure why. Anyway, so you want to read. Okay, good. What do? You go to a bookstore. You go to the library. In this case, you go to a restaurant. Simple. Now, the only thing I'm going to basically tell you is that the only unfortunate comparison to actually wanting to eat at a restaurant is, unfortunately, you can't change the item on the menu. You can't say, oh, I'll have the number 6 without the mayo. Unfortunately, you can't do that with a book. You get what you pay for, so, oh, it's a book. Well, I guess the only choice I really have is whether it's a paperback or a hardback. Well, darn it. Guess that's not gonna happen. So, that's really your only true chance to actually change anything in terms of books. But don't deny that. I mean, you also have the choice to get it digitally. So you can change a little bit, not a lot. So, you're at a restaurant, and you're going to order food. You decide what food, the book, you want to eat. In this case, read. Now, you have a waiting period. In a bookstore, you don't have much of a waiting period unless you're pre-ordering. In which you better have a signed copy of it, because there's no point in getting a pre-ordered book if it isn't signed. Sorry, I don't understand people who, pre-order books and then don't, read it 3 months ahead of time. So, I never understood that at all. So anyway, let's assume that the food has come to your table. Let's safely assume that you're ready to pretty much eat. The book itself is the meal. The book itself is the food that you are presented with. And you know what? That's a good thing. Because you're hungry. So, what is consisted of the meal? First, you're usually given the menu. Now, the menu could be the index. It can be the author's note. It could be anything like that. That is your menu. That is you seeing what you want. Normally we start on page 1, so we'll skip that understanding. Now, the environment of the restaurant can also represent the environment in which you are reading the book. If you're in a place that's comfortable, you will enjoy the book better, or if you're in a place that's really loud and rowdy and you don't swing like that, well, you're probably going to run into a very big situation with not being able to read the book correctly. So keep in mind, you might want to find a comfortable place to sit down and not have your head kinking like mine does, and your arms hurting like mine do. So, the environment, the menu, the need, what next? Usually are given a drink. Usually as an appetizer slash drink. The drink will last all throughout. It is the consistent part that you can be given no matter the price. Usually it is free refills. So you can always go back. It could be the concept of always being able to flip back on the pages. It could also be the reconfirmation of something, whatever that may be. What allows you to wash down everything. It can also be an analogy for logic and how the logic allows you to, something stupid happened, but wait, that's how that world works. Let me wash that down with some water. Appetizer is usually the one that is representation of the prologue. The prologue is usually, if any, and that doesn't mean you don't get appetizers, it just means the beginning of your story is the appetizer. But in most cases, there's a prologue of some kind, or a editor's note, or a editor's letter to the reader. That is your appetizer, whether it be bread, whether it be onion rings, or whatever that may be. How does that taste? Is it good? Does it leave you wanting more? Does it catch your eye? Does it make you want to eat more? That is what it's trying to do, is hook you in. Now, we have all of that. Let's move on. After your appetizer, you usually receive generally a salad, or maybe that is your appetizer, is a salad. But usually if a salad is involved in any way, shape, or form, it could be an analogy of, knowledge and nutrition. So nutrition, knowledge. Not to say nutrition isn't in your main course, but just that. It's a simple representation. It's a well put together representation of your knowledge. And that's fine. Now, what about the course? You've eaten your salad, you got the dressing, you've got the knowledge. You've got the knowledge, and knowledge being broad, knowledge maybe of the world, or the actual facts that apply to their world as well as ours, as such as that Earth has 70% water. That's knowledge. Not only does it apply to your world, but it applies to theirs, therefore there is a logic connection. It is the knowledge of their world, or it's the factual check that you make, making sure that something they said is indeed real. So it's not just some sort of percentage they pulled out of their butt. But even then, it's fact in their world and the way that their world is designed, if that is the way you wrote the book. So as a reader, I do engage in all of those steps thus far. It is the one thing that I look for, how's my environment? How's the water? Or the Coke, whatever, the soda, the pop, whatever, whatnot, however you guys pronounce it these days. I really don't care. And your salad, your appetizers. Those are your main pick-me-ups. This is what's luring me in. As a reader and as a writer, I feel those are very strong points. And they are fine and dandy. If you decide to get wine, it is a very sweet but bitter, and depending on the alcohol, it can also be very cough syrup tasting, which actually is a reference to the first rough draft of my story. There's a moment where she kind of tastes cough syrup in her mouth. Fantasy based, by the way, so take that as you will. Basically, that the wine in my head as a reader and as a writer basically reflects how well you put sentences together, how you do grammar and structure. Even seasonings, I guess the way you season food is a really great way. I guess that's actually a better description of it. But either one would work. The way food is seasoned in general is great for how grammar and the way that the sentence structure is. What really gets to me, especially on Figment, is when people say, your writing style is so good. And I'm sitting there reading this thing going, what is so special about this piece? I see simple words that I've seen every day. These are everyday literature words. Now, maybe that's because they're trying to appeal to the grade that they are writing in. And that's not a bad thing, it's a good thing to have. It's just unfortunate that who not saying that I'm smarter than the average bear, but would like to have some challenging words thrown out, or an interesting sentence structure, or an interesting way that they put the words together. I don't see that very often on Figment, and I really don't see that very often in fan fiction, which is one of the reasons why I don't like fan fiction that much. You're using characters that are already pre-created. You're just coming up with scenarios. This is really cheesy. Now, don't get me wrong. I've seen some really good fan fiction. I've actually seen some really good, well-written fan fictions. Very rare for me to find one that is really good and grips you and just sucks you in. And just says, yes, this is here to entertain me. It'll be well worth the price, and I'll be licking my lips the whole time. So anyway, after the seasonings and the grammar and the sentence structure and basically your schooling, especially if you're the cook, the author, and how well you've prepared this meal and going to the schools and making sure you have literature classes under your belt. The main course is the main meat and potatoes of the meal. Anything like vegetables and stuff like that, stuff that's healthy that you need as a reader, as a writer, as a cook, as an eater. Eater, that's a word. Apparently eater is a word. Yay! But basically just anyone who has that kick. But yeah, meat and potatoes. The meat and potatoes is the main story. It is the story that this thing is balanced on. It is the Harry Potter trying to get rid of Voldemort. It's Harry Potter living the life of a magical school that's boarding rooms and etc., etc., etc. It's the main hook of a story, if you choose to be a fictional writer. And the problem that I keep having with writers, and unless you do it really, really good, like, say, Harry Potter and John Green, J.K. Rowling and The Fault in Our Stars, whatever, it's really hard to work a book with just simply the meat and potatoes. And I think that's what happened with Twilight. Personally, I only read like maybe four paragraphs of the book, maybe that, and I did not feel engaged in any way, shape, or form. Now, if you're a Twitard, awesome, be a Twitard. I don't care. Just to understand I'm not. Understand, I'm not a big fan of Twilight because it relies so much on its content, on its meat and potatoes, and it doesn't focus enough on the seasonings. It doesn't focus enough on the salad and the appetizer. And even the atmosphere of just the whole thing doesn't. No. Remember when vampires were scary and didn't freaking sparkle? So, the meat and potatoes is the main hook. It is the story. It's how well is it seasoned? Is it cooked right? Is it hot enough? Is it warm? Does it need to be cold? Is it a cooler meal? Is it a warmer meal? Does it require you to have a little more spice in your life? Are you having chicken and rice? Are you having meat and potatoes? So how you organize that layout thus far is very important, and it's very important for an author to understand that is the hook, but don't rely solely on just the meat and potatoes. You will fall apart. And as a reader, I'm not just here to understand the story. I'm interested as the narrator as well. Because in a sense, you not only have characters in a book, you also have the narrator. The narrator in his or her own right is a character. The way you put the words together in descriptions and the way that you describe the world in itself shows that they themselves are characters as well. And I want to try to represent that whenever I do write. And when I write fiction, I want to show that the narrator is a character, even though right now we're actually leaning on the fact that my character is the narrator. Literally, it's a first-person view fiction, but you get the idea. I like that in the way John Green, for example, writes his books, because it feels like the narrator is a character, and you kind of want to know about the narrator in a sense, like, wow. And the narrator is John Green, or is it somebody else? Either way, you're hooked. So I mean, the meat and potatoes are your main course. It is the main thing that they're there for, but what about everything else? You can have this fantastically seasoned meat and potatoes. You can have beef and corn and mashed potatoes and biscuits and jam. But then there's nothing around you. You know, you don't have any water. And if you do have water, it's that shitty water, that like chlorine tasting water, and they try to hide it with lemon. Yeah, that's horrible. Um, and all, you have bread, but it's the most crappiest bread. They bought it from Wonder Bread. It's not the greatest bread in the world. It kind of falls apart. You can have this fantastic main plate of food. It could be spaghetti for all you care. But if it's not made right all throughout, it ruins the meal. And you just focus on that main course. The main course was so good. The bread sucked. The wine was horrible. God, that salad tasted so soggy. But the meat and potatoes were great. It falls apart. And I'm really looking for an author who can do that. I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to pull that off. That is my goal. So what happens when you're done eating? You pay the price. Obviously, you pay the price buying a book prior. But you want to know if you fulfilled the price tag. Is it worth the money for me to have read this book? Was it that good? And that's usually your final decision in a business aspect. But as a person who wants this in a more articulate way, in a more, expression of emotion kind of sense, you kind of think about it and you're like, well, maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the greatest, And you start to become a critic. You start to learn what's good, what's bad, what's what's meh, what's yay, what's no. So you're done eating. You've enjoyed the book. You've enjoyed your meal. You pay the man. You walk out. What next? Is it worth looking back on? Did it have a great aftertaste? Which is a really interesting thing. If you chose dessert, by the way, dessert is kind of like your either epilogue or just how it finishes. It can also be a analogy for the way that it finishes. And I don't mean by the finish of the story. I mean by, is it bittersweet? Or is it just sweet? Or did it end on the most darkest note as you lay in your bed crying and tears pour out of your eyes? It's the sweetness of that ice cream. Did you have to use that sweetness of the ice cream from your dessert, or the sweetness of the pie, or anything along those lines in order to fix the weird aftertaste that the book gave you? Because books can leave aftertastes. And I think everyone had a really weird aftertaste when they were reading Harry Potter. Hence the epilogue. Hence a few years later down the road, here's what happened. Da da da. That's kind of your ice cream. Can also be that mint. If you're eating at an Italian or Mexican restaurant, a mint helps. It's that, don't worry, kids, even though he died, this is what happened. And it tries to pick you up again from that really nasty aftertaste. And if they don't provide you one, or they don't provide one that you like, the aftertaste will stay in your mouth. Now, if it's a good aftertaste, that's good. It left an impression on you, and it's well worth your time. That's great. That's important. So, what's left when you're done reading a book? Did you accomplish your end by getting into a comfortable position, finding a good place to read? And let's also take the assumption that you've read this all at once. Because I know you could take home leftovers and pick up later. You can. But we're under the assumption you read this all at once. How did you like your drink? Was the Coke good? Was the wine really good? How was your biscuits and salad? How was your appetizers? How was the main course? Was it seasoned well? Was everything with the correct dressing you wanted? And I say that hesitantly because you can't really change anything in a book, but you can still, I wanted this to happen, but it didn't, There's always that expectations that you can always fail to see sometimes or expect to see. And they do come true. But then after the main course, what happens with the, aftertaste? Is there a dessert or a sweet that kind of gets rid of that really, really bad aftertaste? Does it appeal? Um, so with that comparison and with that analogy, I want to try to become a good writer with that in mind. What other analogies could there be? I don't know. Maybe there's other things like, well, what happens if, you're at an Italian restaurant and instead of meat and potatoes, you have noodles and sauce and meat? What happens if you go to a Mexican restaurant and there's rice? Can that represent something? Can individual food represent something? I don't know. I really didn't think about that. I kind of more just thought meat and potatoes, mashed potatoes, because that is my favorite meal in the whole world. Mashed potatoes, corn, peas, noodles, and biscuits with jam and butter. It's like my favorite meal of all time. But I always try to analyze and let books and writing, and as a reader, definitely as a reader, let that be my formula and how I can analyze and be analytical about certain books and stories in general and how they hook. Harry Potter does a fantastic job of being the meat and potatoes. It's a fantastic job with the seasonings, the wine. Oh, the wine is fantastic. It smells sweet and it's rich. The appetizer was interesting. It was had a really interesting biscuits. I think of biscuits and jam. Maybe biscuits and butter, to be honest. But you get the idea of analyzing a meal, a full course meal, and feeling satisfied in comparison to, did I feel like I got satisfied with this meal of a book? And did that satisfy my hunger for a story? And that's the analogy, and that's the method, and that's the equation, that's the system I want to use, not only as a writer, but as a reader. And I hope that I accomplish that. I hope that I am able to use this method to complete the story that is posted on my Figment account. The problem is, I don't see this method used a lot in the Figment accounts and all these stories I keep reading. Everyone keeps coming up with, these like really interesting stories, but I'm not intrigued by the sentence structure. I'm not intrigued by the grammar. I'm not intrigued by that twist of events, because I'm almost expecting that, what's the twist event? What's going on? Come on. So it's really hard for me to get into stories anymore because I keep seeing the same thing over and over again, and that may be just me. But hopefully, and I pray that I can accomplish this through my poetry, through the writing, and even if someday if I go to radio and TV, if I can actually achieve and be that good of a speaker. Because you can apply the same analogy to a speaker, because I am going for communications in college, so there's that. But anyway, I will talk to you all later. Thank you for hanging in there as I gone through this whole tangent. I'm actually suddenly very tired talking for so long. My mouth is dry, and I actually just got an email from my communications teacher talking about our local AM station asking for people to fill in the blank for staff members. I might look into that. I don't know if I can do it, though, with a part-time school, though, unless I could do like a night shift for like a couple hours. But anyway, I will talk to you all later. Thank you for listening on the podcast. I might try to make a podcast playlist. If anybody's interested in this format, let me know. Did it sound okay? For those who are curious, I'm just using my laptop using Audacity, as well as a, what kind of headset is this? Plantronics headset. It's actually for gaming and regular use, but that is currently what I am using. I might try to get a different kind of mic. I'm not sure yet. Maybe. Kind of. We'll see. Anyway, I will report off. Thank you for listening. List me below analogies of what you think would make great analogies. Even if you don't use the food, method of analogies in a story, what analogy do you use? What is your system of writing? Or what's your system as a reader that helps you decide whether a book is good or a story or poetry is good? Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and I will talk to some of you all later. This is Megan, reporting off. And once again, keep on reading, keep on writing, and I'll see you next time. Peace out.